Welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. Roxanne Wilder here. Pat George is here. And I know Pat George was busy last week watching the Bob Mueller. What is it? It's not investigation anymore.
Well, the hearings.
The Bob Mueller hearings. Sure. There we go.
His testimony about his report.
Right, his testimony about his report.
Very frustrating to watch that.
So he was watching it, and we're both like, wait a second. What are you doing? Morgan's going to have all of the most important parts broken down for us on Monday. We're good.
Well, Pat, what did you think about it? You said it was very frustrating?
Very frustrating to watch it. What I took away from it is that I don't think he was too involved in that.
Yeah. Good point, Pat George, because, he did seem confused a lot of the time. And, one of the first clip we wanted to share with you kind of goes with the news announcement that just came out late yesterday. We wanted to make sure and draw your attention to. And that is that John Ratcliffe, the congressman from Texas, is going to be replacing Dan Coats as the director of national intelligence, which is the highest intelligence position in our country. And he's over all of the intelligence agencies. And so, we think that's a positive development. Some of what we've heard, and of course it's very hard to know what the truth is, but some of what we have heard is that Dan Coats maybe was not assisting President Trump in some of these declassification efforts with some of the information about some of the spy games that were pulled on the Trump campaign. And we've covered them extensively here on this program, including the George Papadopoulos involvement. And remember, there are tapes of whatever George Papadopoulos did say to Alexander Downer and Stefan Halper, two of the people who were involved, who actually involved themselves in George Papadopoulos' life. But, there's a very good chance that somewhere on those tapes is what they call exculpatory information. And for whatever reason, it seems like there's been a series of federal prosecutions in which they have not wanted to give over exculpatory information, which is required under the U.S. Constitution, that the prosecutors give the defense all the information that might help the defense. And that might sound a little bit strange, but the idea is that the sovereign never loses when justice is done. So the state or the country, whatever sovereign we're talking about, doesn't lose just because an innocent man is not convicted. In fact, that's exactly what we want. So if exculpatory evidence would help somebody avoid a conviction, then we want to give it to them because that is how justice will be done. Not by hiding exculpatory evidence and telling the jury maybe half a story that makes somebody look guilty. We don't consider that to be justice. So that's why you'd want to give over the exculpatory evidence, and I just don't know why they have not done that in so many cases over and over and over again, including the case against George Papadopoulos. But let's hear now from John Ratcliffe, who's going to be the incoming, well, assuming that he gets past confirmation, going to be the incoming Director of National Intelligence, and what he has to say about the standard for exoneration and whether there is such a thing. Because remember, Bob Mueller's report concluded that they could not exonerate the president. But let's hear what he has to say about that and the presumption of innocence.
Which DOJ policy or principle sets forth a legal standard that an investigated person is not exonerated if their innocence from criminal conduct is not conclusively determined?
Can you repeat the last part of that question?
Yeah. Which DOJ policy or principle set forth a legal standard that an investigated person is not exonerated if their innocence from criminal conduct is not conclusively determined? Where does that language come from, Director? Where is the DOJ policy that says that? Let me make it easier.
Sorry, go ahead.
Can you give me an example other than Donald Trump where the Justice Department determined that an investigated person was not exonerated because their innocence was not conclusively determined?
I cannot, but this is a unique situation.
Okay, well, you can't. Time is short. I've got 5 minutes. Let's just leave it at you can't find it because I'll tell you why. It doesn't exist. The special counsel's job, nowhere does it say that you were to conclusively determine Donald Trump's innocence or that the special counsel report should determine whether or not to exonerate him. It's not in any of the documents. It's not in your appointment order. It's not in the special counsel regulations. It's not in the OLC opinions. It's not in the Justice Manual. And it's not in the principles of federal prosecution. Nowhere do those words appear together because respectfully, Director, it was not the special counsel's job to conclusively determine Donald Trump's innocence or to exonerate him because the bedrock principle of our justice system is a presumption of innocence. It exists for everyone. Everyone is entitled to it, including sitting presidents. And because there is a presumption of innocence, prosecutors never, ever need to conclusively determine it.
Ooh. I mean, that was pretty strong.
That was my favorite part of the hearing.
Was
right
it really?
There.
Good.
Right there.
Good. Well, I think that right there, that performance, I think we can see why Trump says, you know what? I want this guy on my team.
Sure thing.
I want him. Now, John Ratcliffe sits on both the Judiciary and the Intelligence Committees. Apparently, he's seen just about all of the documents that are behind the Mueller report, including a lot of what has yet to be declassified to the public. So we should remember that when we're hearing from him about some of these things, that he has more knowledge than even we do. But I want to keep moving here because there were so many interesting little clips and snippets. And I want to go next to one. This one is by Doug Collins. You know, he's one of our favorites here, the Republican from Georgia. He sits on the Judiciary Committee. And listen to him try to get Robert Mueller to admit something that we've talked about on this show many times, and that is that the words collusion and conspiracy are synonymous in everyday use. For the way that you and I and everybody else use the words, those are synonymous. Now, they may not be synonymous the way that a federal court would use them, but they're synonymous in the way that normal people use them. And now listen how hard it is for him to get Bob Mueller to admit that, even though it's in his report.
Although your report states collusion is not so specific offense, and you've said that this morning, or a term of art in federal criminal law, conspiracy is. In the colloquial context, are collusion and conspiracy essentially synonymous terms?
You're going to have to repeat that for me.
Collusion is not a specific offense or a term of art in the federal criminal law. Conspiracy is.
Yes.
In the colloquial context, known public context, collusion and conspiracy are essentially synonymous terms, correct?
No.
If no, on page 180 of volume 1 of your report, you wrote, as defined in legal dictionaries, collusion is largely synonymous with conspiracy, as that crime is set forth in the General Federal Conspiracy Statute 18 U.S.C. 371. You said at your May 29th press conference and here today, you choose your words carefully. Are you sitting here today testifying something different than what your report states?
Well, what I'm asking is if you can give me the citation, I can look at the citation and evaluate whether it is accurate.
Okay, let me just be clarified. You stated that you would stay within the report. I just stated your report back to you. And you said that collusion and conspiracy were not synonymous terms. That was your answer, was no.
That's correct.
In that, page 180 of volume 1 of your report, it says, as defined in legal dictionaries, collusion is largely synonymous with conspiracy, as that crime is set forth in General Conspiracy Statute 18 U.S.C. 371. Now, you said you chose your words carefully. Are you contradicting your report right now?
Not when I read it.
So you would change your answer to yes then?
No. If you look at the language.
I'm reading your report, sir. It's a yes or no answer.
Page 180.
Page 180, volume 1. Okay. This was from your report.
Correct. And I leave it with the report.
So the report says, yes, they are synonymous.
Yes.
Hopefully, for finally, out of your own report, we can put to bed the collusion and conspiracy.
Wow. Wow. I mean, that took 2 minutes to get him to agree to something that's in his own report. He was supposed to, I mean, I thought he wrote the report. I thought this was his carefully chosen words. Well, Pat George, how much time do we have? We have time for a couple more clips this segment?
2 minutes.
Okay, we got about 2 minutes. Let's get into James Sensenbrenner, because one of the themes was how confused Bob Mueller was. And boy, this really came out in some of the Sensenbrenner questioning. So listen to this one.
Let me begin by reading the special counsel regulations by which you were appointed. It reads, quote, at the conclusion of the special counsel's work, he or she shall provide the Attorney General with a confidential report explaining the prosecution or declination's decisions reached by the special counsel. That correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when a regulation uses the word shall provide, does it mean that the individual is in fact obligated to provide what's being demanded by the regulation or statute, meaning you don't have any wiggle room, right?
I'd have to look more closely at the statute.
Well, I just read it to you. Okay. Now, volume 2, page 1, your report boldly states we determined not to make a traditional prosecutorial judgment. Is that correct?
I'm trying to find that citation, Congressman.
Well, it's volume 2, page...
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
Yes, volume 2, page 1. It said, we determined not to make a traditional prosecutorial judgment.
Yes.
That's right in the beginning.
Right at the beginning. Bob Mueller doesn't know his own report. And I hear the music there, which tells us we don't have time for the next quote from James Sensenbrenner, but you want to stay over for this one. And we've got a whole bunch more quotes, including Louis Gohmert coming up, and the coup de grace, which will be Jim Jordan questioning him. And you know, when Louis Gohmert and Jim Jordan start getting into Mueller, you know, that is something you are definitely not going to want to miss here on the Morgan Streetman Show. So stick around with us till after this break. We'll also catch up with James Sensenbrenner, and it's so hilarious to hear Bob Mueller question him about where he is reading from, because we come to find out that it isn't quite as interesting as Bob Mueller thought it was going to be, the answer to that question. So stick around. We'll have a lot more for you when we come back on the Morgan Streetman Show. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.